guys, we are back with a new name, brand, and very clear intention of where I see the podcast going. More personal stories from my own life, more stories from inspiring humans I'm drawn to, and a whole lot more pushing comfort zones all around. Meant for This is a place to let your guard down, open your heart, to lean into the uncomfortable stuff. I tell my clients constantly I'm the student and the teacher, that I would never ask them to do something I haven't yet done myself. So with that, before we dive in, if you've felt connected to my story in any way, and this is the year you told yourself was your year, that it was finally time to get out of your own way, stop playing small, and truly take up space, click the link in the show notes or find me on Instagram and book a free clarity call. I am so incredibly passionate about what I do, and I am on a mission to touch as many lives as I possibly can. It is up to you to take the first step toward a bigger life. Okay, back to today's episode. My guest is no stranger to this podcast. I jokingly call him my baby daddy, but he is a million things more than that. He is the man I call to for advice constantly in life and in business. He recently held space for me as I was going through some heartache. He's been there by my side for over 15 years, and while the dynamic of our relationship has changed, he will forever be one of the most important men in my life. Musser is here today, and we talk about something extremely personal to him, a chapter of life he very recently walked through and something not many men open up about, his journey with his own physical and mental health. I really think there's something impactful here for everyone. I hope you enjoy this episode with Musser. You and I haven't done this in a minute.
It has been a while.
So there's a lot of things I feel like you and I have to share. And the piece that's been on my heart and of course has had a huge impact on your life recently is going back to a couple of months ago. You came over, we were having a family dinner, me, you, and Rebel. We hadn't done one of those in a while. And I was excited for us to just catch up and have some time together, and had no idea what was going to be shared. And naturally, as you and I are, things, you love to ask real questions, and so do I. And our conversation just organically evolved into what you had been going through the past 5 to 6 months. And for me, that was, while of course, so necessary for us to have that conversation, reflecting back on that moment and what I was feeling, so many emotions came through of just, wow, we could be moving side by side. And yes, while we don't spend a ton of time together, we still share all of the holidays together. We have, group family dinners with our bigger extended family pretty regularly. And none of this had come up, even though I had an intuitive sense for a while that something was off, but I just felt like he'll come to me if he needs to. And then hearing a lot of the things that you shared, really recognizing that just how difficult it can be when you're going through something really hard to not only ask for help, but even just to let somebody in. And of course, our dynamic has changed and shifted so much over the past couple of years. We've had to release and let go, and there's been a ton of transition with, new relationships and all the things. And so I think in my mind, I had this just thought that I need to let you live your life. And it's not my role anymore to be that person for you. And also knowing that check in on your people. And I don't need to I could go on and on and on about all of that stuff, but I really would love for you, because you are such a great storyteller and you aren't afraid of being honest and raw and vulnerable and going to, the depths of places that a lot of people, and men specifically, carry a lot of fear and insecurity around, going to those places. And so I really just want you to take the time to share your story, because I think it's important. And I think there's a lot of people out there with maybe this isn't like a direct hit for everybody, but there's a lot of people that can relate to a big portion of the things that you went through last year. So I'll stop talking.
Thank you for the chance to talk about this. And I've been wanting to share more about it. And I was thinking before we got over here where to start. And I think starting at the 50-yard line is probably a good place to start, because we can build in what I think is the more fundamental pieces of what created it. But I'm going to start toward the middle of last year. It was actually, it was April of last year, and I was turning 39. And I went to Korea with my girlfriend. She was born in Korea. So I'd never been to an Asian country before, and I was super excited, and it did not disappoint. It was so cool. And I'd put it at just one of the more amazing, incredible, surreal travel experiences I've ever had in my life. And it was just really amazing. It reminded me in some ways just the way it impacted me when I first came to Hawaii, and being enamored by this culture. And I'm not going to spend too much time on Korea, but I'll tell you that some of the takeaways for me when I was there were the people, the commitment to excellence. And it's similar to Japan and some other Asian countries as well, where it doesn't matter if it's a mom and pop retail store or a restaurant or any kind of small business, even a franchise 7-Eleven owner, they're going to do things at a level of excellence that you just don't see in a lot of other places. You certainly don't see it in America. No shade on Hawaii, but you typically don't see it here. It's just not the culture. I say that with love and respect. But that's something that I've always really been inspired by. And coming back from this trip, I was really trying to embody that. How can I be a better father and a better partner and a better friend? But really, if I'm being honest, it was how can I inject this into my business and be excellent? And I don't think that's necessarily the jet fuel that my personality needed, because I do operate with a lot of that as my fuel, regardless of having a trip and being motivated by a culture. So I bring that into context because when I got back, I had a lot of plates spinning. I had this team that, I'm very proud of, but it was a lot of work to kind of get that team up and running. I also, in my industry in real estate, and there's no need to get into too much detail about what the market's been and how hard it's been to be a real estate agent, but it's been a really challenging few years, especially since COVID. And I was just on this crazy, it just took a lot more output to do what you were doing the year before. And I was already on this trajectory where I was having my best year in the business, on paper. And I want to emphasize that. And so I'm doing all these things simultaneously, and I just have my hands in so many areas of my business, right? And that's a lot of that's new for me, especially to take it all on at one time. I'm also, in a semi-new relationship, and at that time, and I'm, still processing being, and this is where before the 50-yard line, still processing, but not really what it is to be divorced and what all that stuff was. And I'm going to come back to that. So the energy is high and I'm feeling good when I get back. And then May, I just start to feel this lull in my energy. And I start to feel this heaviness. And I don't know what it is because I feel I didn't know what it was back then. I feel I've always been pretty aware of there's the dark cloud of stress, you know, there's the dark cloud of anxiety. These things that I think can come with a healthy fuel behind them of self-awareness. Like it's okay to be anxious and stressed about certain things that there's a remedy in play there. And there's this dance you have with a certain type of stress, like ice tanks, like that cold therapy, that's stress, working out, that's a good stress. But if it's this chronic kind of low grade, medium grade stress, I think that's something I was starting to feel. And I started to get sick, you know, to fast forward into a couple months after that. So we'll put us into June and July. I started to, well, I'll tell you, like my gut felt like there's something really, really wrong. And I started to get to this place where I was just zapped on my energy and I was starting to just kind of randomly throw up. And that really freaked me out because I didn't know what it was. And I was eating pretty clean. I was basically eating like a Whole30 diet. You know, I started to cut out a lot of things, coffee, alcohol, and it kept getting a lot worse, like a lot worse. So it'd go from like throwing up maybe once a week to, and that was the thing that really got me, was the throwing up piece, because it felt so specific and so detrimental to the rest of my day, and my energy was like, it would just zap me completely. And I was losing weight. It got to a point, July, August, where I was losing like a pound every 2 weeks, you know? And for me, that's a big deal. I'm not someone who's ever wanted to lose weight,
Not carrying a lot of body fat.
not carrying a lot. And I'm grateful for, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for my genes. I'm naturally a leaner guy, but it's weird for me to have that going on. And I was also feeling this really increasingly intense level of just depression. I didn't know that's what it was back then. I didn't know that that's what was going on, which I'm going to come back to how scary that is, to not have awareness around it. It's given me so much more empathy for mental health and all the things connected to it. So the frequency it just kept getting worse. It just kept, it would go to, I was throwing up like once a day to, we'll put us into September, and I was throwing up multiple times a day, and I'd lost so much weight. And I was just really sad all the time. And, what's interesting too is to talk about my own psychopathy, or maybe more of a psychosis, is I was still able to put on the face for work. I would, and that's the part that really actually got to me the most, is people really didn't know what was going on with me. They're like, a few people were, there's something off about you. There's something off about your color, even. There's something off about your energy. And then it started to manifest physically too. I got these rashes on my body. I had these styes in my eye. I had this crazy thing on my left eye that I had to have removed. It was basically a cyst growing inside of my eye. And I've gotten blood work done at this point. I've gone to some doctors. The best they could give me is you have high cortisol. You have high stress. And I'm like, that's not doing much for me. I need answers. I've been stressed out before. And I also couldn't comprehend, and maybe it's my own lack of humility. I couldn't comprehend that I didn't have control over my mind, that my mind was manifesting all these things. And it's interesting, just the web of how frustrating it got toward end of September into November, October, November. Sorry, I'm skipping months. But I finally start to open up a little bit about it, like how and some of it was just unavoidable. Some of it was I would have people over. I remember having my friend Tremaine over, and I had to excuse myself to throw up twice during a dinner. I just wasn't good. I remember I was shaking towards the end of the night. I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm sorry. He's like, it's okay, man. And he's like, you good? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Just kept telling people I'm good. Kept telling myself I'm good. And I really wasn't. It was heavy. I would really not sleep, you know, which made everything a lot worse. If anyone's ever dealt with that, like real insomnia. And then when I would squeak out maybe 2-3 hours of sleep, I would wake up with the most crippling depression and anxiety that I had to go through all this again. You know, the next day and the next day, it was like the worst version of the Truman Show. You know, that it was just day in and day out, and it was like that for a few months, really bad. And I'm gonna keep coming back to the gut stuff because it was so intense to like I wasn't able to hold food down. I wasn't able to sleep. I'm still some way somehow able to work though. And so I'm getting these like accolades at work. I'm having the best year I've ever had at work. And people are like, good job, Jared. But also you look a little sick, you know? And then going into November, that was the darkest month by far. The darkest month. Yeah. There were a lot of mornings where I'd wake up in November for I'd say most of the month where I just didn't want to do anything. You know, I just want to lay in bed all day. But I didn't. You know, I got up and I was still going through the motions. I was still trying to work out. I was still trying to do the things that made me feel good, but none of it was making me feel good. And then, you know, to fast forward to Thanksgiving, I remember Thanksgiving was, I'm always going to remember that because I just wasn't getting better. I kept having these really dark thoughts too, up to that point of basically, if I stay on this path, doctors don't know what's going on. I don't feel like I have a grip on what's going on. I didn't associate it with it being something with my mind. Like I'm kind of done. You know, this could be it for me. This could be the end of the road, and I'm not sure how much longer I have. And I remember going to Thanksgiving and seeing, you know, our family and being with everybody and having this kind of realization. I'm like, I wonder if this could be my last Thanksgiving because this trajectory I'm on right now is, I don't see a way that I can do this for 6 more months. You know, definitely not another year. It was just too dark. And the day after Thanksgiving, Black Friday, I got what felt like, I don't know, a really bad flu. Felt like COVID, to be honest with you. And I started to, and by the way, at this point, I had opened up with a lot of people about kind of how bad it had gotten. And that was helpful. That was helpful in the immediate that at least people knew what was going on. And yeah, it's crazy to think back to that time because I remember that day one of having the flu, we're going to call it. I was really sick. I was super high fever. And what's interesting is I wasn't throwing up that day. And I could start to feel this. I don't know how else to describe this, but I started to feel this healing in my gut that was really somatic. It was like moving through my whole body. I could feel it in my head. It's like my head, my heart, everything was talking in my gut. And the message that I was unclear at the time what was happening. I just assumed that I had the flu. But the message that was kind of coming through me is that you've had enough and you've learned your lesson. I didn't know what the lesson was yet. I'm still figuring that out. Spoiler alert, but because I had never been through anything like this before, you know. But day one was just a lot of that heaviness, and honestly, a lot of emotion came out of me too. Because one thing I haven't really mentioned here is that for about 5 months, but really effectively like three out of those 5 months, I was incredibly numb. Like no crying, no laughing. Couldn't even really feel anger, you know, and just kind of a robot of myself, like a shell. And so day one, I just remember just weeping the whole day. I was just like, but also so grateful that I could feel. You know, I was so grateful that I was able to feel enough to cry. I was able to feel enough to mourn, you know, mourn what the last 5 months have been. And there's a lot more that I'm going to get into about that day. But day two is just basically more of that, you know. And I'm not feeling better yet. I'm like super high fever, not sleeping. I'll be honest with you, I had these thoughts of like, well, maybe this is it. You know, maybe this is the last. Because the way the last 5 months had gone, I was like, maybe this is it. And then day three, I remember watching, I think it was like maybe Forgetting Sarah Marshall or some stupid comedy, like something I knew I liked that's a familiar favorite. I'm just posted up on the couch. And I remember laughing a little bit and being like, whoa, okay, laughing's online. All right, let's go. And I was able to feel that and feel that laughter move through my body. And that was a big deal because I hadn't really felt like I really laughed for months. You know, I haven't really felt even a splinter of that, of enough joy to really laugh and really mean it. And then day four came around, and I'd say day four and day five were some of the best days I had had in about 5 months. And I just felt like collectively everything kind of all started to click back together, and I wasn't throwing up, and I wasn't feeling that sadness anymore. I wasn't feeling that anxiety anymore. But, you know, it's when I was dreaming during those nights, each night, I was having this like almost like an ayahuasca experience where I was starting to really kind of take apart and look at different things that may have caused this. And we can spend some more time on that because I've spent a lot of time thinking about it and feeling into it. My relationship with stress, my relationship with money, my relationship with everything that we went through, with being a single father, with actually being a leader, being this version of myself, of being a man, and you know, letting go of the boy, letting go of the story. And so there's so much there, but that was probably the darkest 5 months of my life. Yeah.
You essentially shared that story with me when you came over for dinner a couple of months ago. And there's so many emotions that go through your mind, that went through my mind during that time of, because I had this intuitive sense every time I saw you, like, you're not there. Your light is gone. Your spark, you weren't making jokes, but it had become such a slow shift that it was almost like it was difficult to, I don't know. I think I felt a lot of like guilt for not speaking up, and then recognizing that you're the father of my child and you were experiencing something so dark. all by yourself. And we had essentially spent every day together since I was 22. And while I've done a ton of healing and processing our divorce, it still is relatively fresh. And it's such an interesting transition when you make that choice mutually. It's a mutual choice that we both came to together to separate and live apart, sign that paper. But internally, there's still such a bond and this intertwined sense that you and I just share and will forever share, that is still, in the process of releasing and letting go a little bit more and a little bit more. And so when you shared all of that, there was also, while there was so much sadness, there was also like anger of, why the fuck didn't you tell me? And then of course, like when that softens and the empathy comes in of recognizing like you didn't know how. And you also didn't know how bad it had gotten until it had gotten really bad.
And not associating it with my, so I think that's a really just quick and important segue into me talking to a couple therapists and them telling me, basically diagnosing me with like, you have no idea how common these symptoms are with someone who's had like a hyper level of stress and depression, which stress, you could say depression and anxiety are downstream from stress if stress goes unmitigated, but stress is such a big word. Stress can be the immediate, like acute stuff from your job. It can be money. It can be so many different things. It can be unprocessed stuff, an unprocessed like fragments of what a divorce was or separation. It can be childhood. It can be all these things. And I think I just had this like bottleneck effect on that chapter of my life where I had super identified with what I thought was the best version of myself. But if I'm being really honest, a lot of it was like hyper identity around my work. And again, if I'm really being honest, it wasn't as much focus on me truly bettering myself as a complete man. All those things that I like, the Jason Williams and these people online, they're talking about what it is to be a comprehensive man. I felt like I had kind of read that stuff and listened to that stuff and swept it under the rug and was just really in this go mode, this hustle mode with my work, and lost myself in the process. And it became, what that was, and they're just, and one more thing I want to say too about the depression piece of it. And I've had this conversation now with a few of my guy friends, which I think is really important. And anyone that's really experienced depression, it's given me such a different view of it, is you don't know how to ask for help because you're not sure that's what it is. You just think it's you. And you talked about this slow kind of death by 1,000 paper cuts effect of seeing me change. And that's also, you have to remember the process I'm having, the relationship with myself too, where I'm feeling myself change slowly over time. And it's like that frog boiling to death in water. It's because you raise the temperature slowly. So you almost don't have that awareness to even know how to ask for help because you're not sure that's what it is. You just think that's you. And then in that really dark place, it takes a tremendous amount of like heavy lifting and work on yourself to even know that that's what's going on, or it takes your body shutting down. And my thing was the latter. And I just think about people who are going through some version of that, and it is hard to describe how lonely it is. Really. It is so hard to describe it because you feel like you're the only person going through it. And as a man, you feel really weak even talking about it. And that's how big my ego is and is that I just pushed that possibility so far away. I'm like, there's no way this is my mind. Get the fuck out of here. Are you kidding me? I listened to the Andrew Huberman podcast. It can't be my mind. Like, I have an ice tank. Can't be me. I eat organic sweet potatoes. But the truth is, it absolutely was my mind and my spirit. And something I hope that I will forever. Well, there's no way. Like I'm forced into shape. I think I'm forced into looking at mental health in a completely different way.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that experience. I know it sounds trite, but I really am grateful for what those months were and everything that's led me up to this point.
Yeah, I really have come to a place of the deepest level of healing really is being able to look back on something with gratitude and being able to see, oh yeah, that actually had to happen exactly as it did, because otherwise I wouldn't have learned those lessons. Mm-hmm. It had to get that hard. Yeah. It had to get that, for me, had to get that messy. Our relationship had to unravel the way that it did so that I could go to the depths of my own darkness so that I could confront those pieces of myself with compassion and love and understanding and curiosity and make a change and recognize like that is not the person I want to carry on into the future. That is not the model I want to be from our daughter. And while, yeah, it's so tough because we're not taught this stuff. We're not taught how to sit with our emotions. We're not taught how to like deeply feel our feelings. We're not taught that like the full spectrum of all of it is actually a requirement of being human, that we all signed up for this.
Well, that it's as essential as, and this is how I'm choosing to look at it. I really believe this. It's as essential when we're talking about mental health and sitting with our, I hate that term, by the way, mental health, but I'd just say being comprehensive in your mind and your spirit, is as essential in my view as breathing and drinking water and moving your body and being in good relationships and looking at the sun, and all these things are essential. And, I think I'm as guilty of it as anyone, especially in America and civilized Western countries, that we somehow have found a way to parse that stuff kind of to the side and put the other things in front of it.
Yeah.
And you can say it's like America's such a pretty country in that way. Like the outside looks good, but what's going on internally? Again, ironic that I come back from hanging out with monks in Korea and I land on, double clicking on that behavior.
Yeah, I think, when you're in your 20s, you think you're invincible, that, you can do anything. You don't really feel the big effects on like the same scale that you start to feel when you reach, your mid to late 30s. Mm-hmm. And then you step into your 30s and the cost of certain lifestyles or certain, choices that we make, they start to stack up over time. And if you don't take a look at some of that stuff, it will express in illness or in other ways in, for me, having an affair. There's so many different ways that they show up in our life. And again, like, this is where I think,
but just to like, just, I think that's an important thing to focus on is everything is connected to what you just said. You think about how, this is dark, someone in a relationship, like the husband maybe has an alcohol problem, maybe doesn't, but becomes slowly physically abusive, and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. You think about someone who's just not good with their money, and that's a habit where it's one credit card that maybe you shouldn't have gotten, maybe you swipe that thing too many times, then it becomes this cataclysmic thing in their 40s or their 50s or their 60s where it's bankruptcy and they lose everything. It's your money, it's your spirituality, but it's all this compound effect of decisions we make and not being willing to look under the hood of these areas of our lives and compensating most likely in other areas to make up for it. And I've certainly compensated, and just to go forward a bit too of what December 1st was for me, and I count those days still, was the first day that I'd really started to feel like myself. And it's amazing. The human body, the spirit are amazing of just how quickly I started getting better. The shit on my eyes started to go away. I ended up having to have actually surgery after that because my eyes had gotten so bad. And to bring people into that, Socrates, who was it that says everything, all health is related to your gut? Basically, that's the core, the source of all your health, right? And so because of that, the pH in my body was off. And so I started to get these skin rashes. I actually started to my hair started to thin for a couple months. It was freaking me out. I got this ridiculous red light helmet for $800.
oh my God.
I got this, I was buying all these products. I was like, I have to save my hair, which I still feel that way. And I'm not worried about it now, but we'll get to that. But yeah, things were just starting to really shut down. And it's amazing how all of it came back to the gut, and fast forwarding to today, it's like my hair is totally back to what it was. My skin's healed up. I only have like a 10% lazy eye now. No, my eye's going to be a long journey, but it's getting better. And I gained, so I had lost 15 pounds, which is crazy. I was down to my high school weight.
Wow.
Yeah. At 39, I was down to my high school weight and lost a lot of muscle. And now I'm up 15 pounds back to where I was. But it's just amazing how quickly the body gets back to its equilibrium, but the mind needs to be there. The mind they're on the same boat, and they're eventually going to the same place. And so how do you keep all the passengers in this meat vessel we have? How do you keep all of it in check?
Yeah.
And when I hear, the word holistic now, I'm like, oh yeah, it's everything.
So with everything that because I know you're a deep thinker.
It's part of the problem. It's part of the gift and it's part of the curse.
And you've spent many hours processing everything that you went through last year. For someone that may be in it or maybe carrying some worry or fear that they may be on that road, what do you think? And I also preface this with life is never a one size fits all. There's no manual that's going to work for you, that's going to work for somebody else. I think that that's important to say. But what are some of the biggest lessons and learnings or, pieces of wisdom that you could share, especially just for men? Because I think that so many men get to a place where it just all has to completely fall apart before they make a change. So like, how could somebody avoid that? Or
The first thing that comes up for me, and it makes me a little emotional talking about it, because there's so much scar tissue in what modern day men think it is to be masculine, and being strong and white knuckling your way through it. And that is probably the worst thing you could do. And that's what I tried to do. So asking for help has never been my strong suit. And I think a lot of men are that way. I think a lot of people are that way. And so I don't think there's any coincidence. It's when I basically was at my lowest and so desperate to feel good, and so desperate just to be. It's really hard to describe how dark it got, to put it into words. But it was at that point when I finally started telling people what was going on and really asking for help. And so the best advice I would give is to, one, ask for help and be in community with, I mean, for me, it was especially other men. It was really important. I remember telling my friend Tremaine about it, and he got really mad. He's like, how could you let so much of this happen and not tell me about it? I thought we were brothers. How could you let that happen? And then at the same time, I had to remind him what limited capacity you have to even ask for help in that moment. So that brings me to my second point, which I think is almost more important, is check on your people, and do it often. Don't let that thought pass through your head of, I should check on whoever, and then a week goes by, because I believe that even that thought entering your head is energy, that person probably needs you to check on them. And ask them how they're really doing. Like, really get into it. Not, how's work? How's the, oh, it's been raining so hard in Kailua lately. Well, good to chat with you. But get into it. And just make that a routine. I think so much of this could be solved by being in community. We're meant to be in community. We're meant to check on each other. And that's a really big one. The third thing I would say is just inventory. Like, how important is money? How important is accolades at work? Like, you could argue that stuff, absolutely, it's like, it has energy. There's certain things way beyond like I made this much this year, or I bought this, or I got these accolades at work. Way beyond that you're proving something to yourself. But the real thing that, I brought Tremaine up a lot, but he's one of the most successful people I know, and we have this thing in common where, what was the analogy I used the other day? It was about entrepreneurship and just working real hard and trying to create something special, and having probably, some kind of scar tissue from your childhood or your past, where in having that kind of background, which is most entrepreneurs, it's most business owners, there's a clean fuel that's a long-term sustainable fuel. And I'm talking about your mental health now, and like where that energy actually comes from. And then there's this like, fuck you energy towards maybe a father, which I have, and your childhood, and I'm going to prove them wrong. And that's a dirty fuel. And that certainly will keep the rocket ship going. Maybe it gets it off the launch pad, but eventually that thing is going to blow up. And if you keep using dirty fuel to run your life, you will pollute your soul. And that is something I've really thought a lot about. Is it's not necessarily the thing you're doing for work, it's the thing that drives you to do the thing. And so what's really driving you? That's really important. And lastly, I would say, really remember what we're here to be. And we're here to be vessels of love and have as much fun as we possibly can and try to just create and connect along the way. But if we're not having fun and being really intentional about that, days and weeks and years go by that feel kind of gray and dim. And if I'm being really honest, I've had some long stretches of my life where they felt kind of gray because I wasn't emphasizing the fun. I'd have friends invite me, let's go on a trip, let's do this, let's do this. And I always had this resistance because I felt like I'm not the guy that has fun. I'm the guy that's running from the poverty train, the toxic fuel that I'm talking about, the fear, the something to prove, the chip on my shoulder. So I'm going to keep using this dirty fuel to keep creating something which actually has all these other problems because I'm also bad with my money and I'm also numbing myself to forget about how hurt I am, and I'm also unprocessed in all these other ways. And so it's this like shame cycle around that too. But really it's the willingness to have fun and be free and be spontaneous is also a letting go of the fear that you aren't good enough to have that fun, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. And I think for a lot of people, I just kind of want to speak to just the seasons of life and that line, this too shall pass. It really is super important to believe that and embody that, whether you're in a dark place or you're in a beautiful place of ecstasy, that it is going to pass. And for me, that like I had to go through a super lonely chapter after, I was building my business. You and I separated. I was living alone for the very first time. I didn't have community. I had family, my like immediate family. But other than that, super lonely. And I know that I share this because I have conversations with women and with people online constantly that I know that this is really common. We're living in an era right now with technology and everything, and there's so much beauty to all of that. And also there's a lot of people out there that are feeling really lonely, that are lacking community. And so I just want to say, like, if you're in that right now and you're craving, you talk about your friends and the men in your life and people that you finally opened up to. If you're craving that, keep asking for it. Keep calling that in. Keep believing that it's coming, because that lonely chapter doesn't last forever. Sometimes you have to be in that. I had to be in that to feel and to learn and to process all of the stuff that I needed to go through, to then call in the people that were meant to walk into my life. And now I have this beautiful community of these soul aligned friendships that I've never had ever before. And I just wanted to emphasize that, because the healing that comes from community, true community, people that you could call at any moment and they would drop everything to be there for you, those people, that can completely change and shift the trajectory of your life.
It's hard to even describe how many things are fixed by being around the right people. I even had this experience the other day because I've been working from home again. And so what I want to do is, like, in a year, have another podcast that's impactful, because I want to go through the same gut things again. I just want to experiment. No, I'm joking. I don't even want to joke about that.
Please don't.
No, I've been working from home lately just because I've been wanting to just get her done, and I have. I've been getting a lot of good work done. But it's weird to not see a human being, but be interacting with human beings all day.
Yeah.
And like doing the social media thing and the marketing thing and the networking calls and all the other things. And I'm like, I haven't seen like people. This is starting to get weird. And I went over to pick up Rebel, and I was talking with your parents and TJ, who's awesome.
TJ is my cousin.
Cousin TJ, also a friend, and I still call him cousin.
Yeah.
And him and I were just rapping out about something really dumb. We didn't get deep about it.
Yeah.
I think he was asking me about surfing. He's trying to learn how to surf. And I just felt like this thing come through me of like, oh, wow. Oh, yeah. Like you need to actually see people and talk to people. And even if it's something simple where there's like a little bit of levity or a splinter of a real moment of like you both see each other. It's not saying like I had to pour on him, oh, my day was stressful because of this. And it's been kind of a sad week with the weather, to be honest. And man, I've been trying to make gains at the gym, but feeling like I'm not pouring stuff on him. And that's fine too. If you got a friend or a homie like that, even better. But it was just being able to have a conversation about something and connect. And anyway, that goes back into the just having fun thing, is allow yourself to have that and have a lot of that.
Yeah.
And not like that's extra, but that's a huge part of what every day should be.
Yeah.
As best as you can make it that way.
Yeah.
And that's all these other things that we've always heard about, like life by design. And again, it's like you hear it like holistic healing, community, oxytocin. You hear these things and they're kind of shallow until you have this visceral run-in with them of like, oh, that's why. That's actually what that means.
Yeah.
But you have to really feel it.
Yeah. And the visual that always comes to mind, because my friends and I love to talk in emojis via text. And I relate to so much of what you said because my life is virtual in a lot of ways. I do a lot of podcasts.
A lot of us are.
Yeah, a lot of us are.
Yeah.
And I see people through a screen, but it's just not the same. But the visual that we like to use is just the battery being on empty to the battery being to after we interact with one another, we spend a little bit of time together, to being at full. We're completely at max.
Such a good point.
The battery is fully charged now. And you brought up in taking inventory. Another important piece of all of this, and sometimes this can be like the most difficult, challenging part of it all, is taking social inventory of your life and your relationships. And if you leave those friendships or you leave those interactions and your battery is on E, that's not the community we're talking about.
Such an important point.
And it can be difficult. And I say all this being on the other side of it because I had these childhood friendships that I was gripping tight to, even though intuitively I knew deep down that we weren't right for each other anymore mutually, both ways. But I was holding on to it so tightly because I just couldn't fathom having no friends and not having them in my life anymore. And that sometimes is the decision that like you need to lean into.
Sometimes you need to set yourself free.
Totally. Because there's no space for the right people to come in. I had no space until I had nothing. They were all stripped away. And I was, again, in this very lonely chapter, but then one by one, and it happened within weeks of each other, where all of these people started coming into my life because I had space for them. So
that's powerful. Yeah, I'm jealous of your friend posse. You guys are so close, and it's so awesome to see you guys together. It is. And it's, again, I'm saying all this is not a person that certainly has mastered any of it. I think I've gotten a lot better in these areas, and I'm still figuring it out. I think men are historically more separated friendship wise than maybe we've ever been.
yeah.
It's really weird.
Yeah.
I know so many men, they're just like, I want to have friends. I want to hang out with more guys, but it feels like, how about this weather, by the way? I don't know if you guys I'm looking out this way and it's
storming.
Like, is this structure going to be okay?
I mean, the power's been out in a lot of places today.
And see if I had more male friends here right now, they could make sure that the structure's okay. And so can women. Women can too. I wasn't saying that women can't. Make sure structures are okay.
I don't want to be doing that kind of work. Men can take all of that.
Thank you for being honest. One thing I wanted to say too is just back to the momentum, whether it's positive or negative, is something I had such a hard time with as I was getting better. And it still is hard for me is, you know, we're co-parenting, we're splitting time with our daughter 50-50. And there were nights over there where I was really giving it my best. And I was in the peak of, this is like, you know, her birthday month was one of the worst months, October. And I was really holding it together as best I could. And she'd be on the couch and I'd be making her dinner. And I remember I had to run to the bathroom to go throw up, you know, and I just had no energy. And it started to scare her. And I started to really become aware of, you know, maybe she doesn't want to be around me, you know, when I'm feeling like this. It gave me empathy for people that are going through some kind of real like illness, like maybe people that are processing cancer or something like that, that it's so hard for people to be around, and kids are so honest that there's this other component of being sick that has like shame of I'm not being a good parent. Oh. And that shame of me really coming to terms with the fact that I had this like vacancy of being a good father because I had been so sick was really hard to process. And that comes back and that gets me a few times a week, just thinking about, I can never have that time back, you know? And she's changing so quickly and she's going through so much in her amazing little spirit of the girl she's evolving into. And I want to be a part of every piece of it. And I feel like I missed 5 months of it, you know?
Yeah.
And there's so many pieces of going through something like that again, I just can't help but to think about people going through something similar, but maybe like a cancer, or maybe, but bring it back to anything, stress, depression, maybe even people going through some kind of addiction, you know, that, the shame cycle is just a gnarly thing, you know? And again, that's community though. That's asking for help, asking for support.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the biggest lesson and learning in all of this for me has been, because I can be, one of my strengths, I think, really is like loving on the people that I love. Like if you're in my inner circle, you are fucking loved. Like I will go to the end of the earth, little things like that just fill me up, cooking you meals, like just like little things like that. And also though, I think the opposite of that for me, and something that I'm consciously trying to work on, is I can sometimes get wrapped up in my own world and my own stuff, and I can keep things or people at arm's length. And this is conditioning and cycles and patterns that goes way back for me.
I also think people listening to this there are so many people I've realized they're going to relate to that. Like as you're talking through that, I'm like, oh, that's me, you know, 100%. But keep going.
Yeah.
I want to add to the end of this.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, everything that you said of when that intuitive feeling clicks in, lean in. Ask, make a phone call, send a text message, whatever the thing is, show up at someone's house, like take them out to lunch or coffee and say like, hey, are you okay? Because I feel this in my body, and I'd be lying if I said that I didn't feel that so many times with our interactions. But I think I just was like, he'd tell me, he'd come to me. I'm the mother of his child. If he needed help, he would ask. He'd say something.
Yeah, and I again, I want to emphasize, I think it's really important to remember that we judge people's experiences based on our state typically. And so when you're dealing with someone who's like compromised with their mental state, or they're going through something, I don't know, I catch myself doing this a lot where I judge them within my own state. Like, yeah, I'd say something, you'd say something when you're feeling good enough to.
Yeah.
But if you're not feeling good enough to, then it really becomes our duty as friends and people and family and people in relationship to initiate that. And I want to keep just coming back to that's, I think, something that so many of us are missing. Like, are you okay?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, and it doesn't take much, you know?
Yeah.
Doesn't take much.
Yeah, if I had really come to you and said, I'm worried about you. How are you really doing?
You said that a few times. You
Did I?
said I'm worried about you, but that was me basically just telling you I threw up 3 times today. And I remember sending you a few voice notes like, I'm not doing good, but I'm going to be okay and I'll get through it. And I think it's also the ability to really read between the lines.
Yeah.
Like, is what I'm seeing on the TV actually matching like the audio,
Yeah.
Because the audio of what I was saying the right things, and people say the things that they think people need to hear to get them off their backs. And that's what I was doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what was so difficult for me is like you've always been the provider. You've always been This is hard to talk about. Because it's had to change just in the natural flow of our lives and the separation. You were always the person I came to for advice, for guidance, for support. And you still are in a lot of ways. Any big business decision, I still send you a voice note, which is a beautiful thing. And also, I think because you've always been that like safety net for me, it was like you couldn't be the person that needed me.
Also, and thank you for saying that. That means a lot to me. I think I've made myself that for a lot of people too. Obviously, you're someone in my life that I've given a lot of that to, and I've very intentionally done that because I've wanted to be that person for you. I've wanted to be a support. But I'm thinking right now, 4 or 5 people who compliment me with that. Like, I feel like I can come to you for these things, but we can talk about the people pleaser inside of me, and we can talk about all these other things that again are, I think, byproducts of uncontested, I hate saying it, but childhood stuff, where I never was a person who created like a reciprocal relationship in that way for myself, where I felt like I never set it up where people would come to me. And now I don't think there's any irony that the people closest to me are the people that initiate that, where I've done a good job for a good chunk of my life of creating one-way streets where I'm just giving and I want to be the person that people need because that validates me in some way. And so I would say like release maybe some guilt around that you're just another one of my victims. No, I'm joking. You were another person who needed probably more clarity, but some space away from it to see like I am that for you. But if you really look at it, it requires a certain amount of openness for me to be able to even receive help. And that would require me probably asking for help,
Yeah.
Asking for advice in a real way.
Yeah.
Not, what do you think about this? What do you think about this graphic? What do you think about this thing? What do you think about what that person said in business? What do you think about that? Like, I feel like in our relationship, I kept it very surface, but you would go deeper on, what do you think about this? And then the only time I would really go deeper on, this is what I need, is when things would get pretty bad. And it's like I hadn't really laid out the road work to even go down that lane in a meaningful way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's the first time I think I've ever said it like that or thought about it that way.
Yeah, I think there's like it absolutely goes both ways, but at the end of the day, like if you're the person that's going through the thing, you have to be the one to crack a window a little bit. Has to, because people could check in, and I'm glad that you even brought that up, because I think blacked that out, that I even said to you, I'm worried about you. And I did say that a few times.
Yeah. I mean, you left me some voice notes of
tears.
Like I'm worried that you're not okay.
Yeah. But you putting up this guard of, I'm going to be okay.
Even in that state too, which is amazing to me. Even in that state, the avatar of like, I'm still a boss at work, and I'm still, and I kind of was like, I was still doing the things. I remember up to a point where, and I'm really trying to make it a point not to talk about what I do for work on here, because I feel like it's so icky I don't want to give people an impression for a second that I want any like recognition for my industry in this podcast. But I think it's important to frame that I work in real estate, and I was in this particular story, I was at a inspection with a client, and I remember I was still telling myself it was okay. And it was a really long inspection, and I was there for like 3.5, 4 hours, and I almost threw up a bunch of times. I think I did go into my car, and I threw up in like a water bottle that I had, and I cleaned myself up, and I came back into the house, and I couldn't even stand. I was sitting, and they were all standing going through the house, and they were just looking at me. And I remember just lying to them saying, I've been dealing with like the flu or something. And then they're like, oh, you have the flu? And I'm like, oh. Yeah. But even to that point, I didn't have the awareness of like, I need to like take some time right now and figure this out. Yeah. I was still like pushing through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we've spent so much time talking about me. It's weird. I always have a hard time with that.
I think a lot of people do, especially men, though. That's why I felt this conversation was so important. I mean, lots of reasons. Specifically, though, because I think men aren't given permission to open up this way and to get really honest with some of the things that they're carrying. And it may not be to the level and extent of what you experienced and went through. It could be something that's just, kind of mellow in the background, but it's there, it's in existence. And we as humans have gotten so good at burying and pushing things down or numbing or avoiding or distracting. But to really take some time to sit with that and bring it to the surface and acknowledge it and have a little bit of curiosity. I just think it's an important part of this human existence.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really important to be the message too. And that's something I'm really focused on is now with the lessons I've learned from that time. It's what is this new? It's funny because Lunar New Year started yesterday. Chinese New Year, Lunar New Year.
We're not
And
calling it Chinese New Year anymore.
is
Have
that-
you heard that?
Is that not allowed?
No, I just think we've transitioned to Lunar New Year because we don't want to be too offensive. You know, we're so sensitive. We're so sensitive.
That it was lunar because it's also New Year for like most Asian countries.
Oh,
And so it's actually not appropriate to call it Chinese New Year because there's a bird.
bird just landed.
Squirrel.
Flew into the window. Never seen a bird
How
land
nuts
there.
would it be if that bird started talking? He's like, it's Chinese New Year.
Yeah, maybe I just heard that we transition to Lunar New Year because we don't want to be offensive.
Yeah,
but maybe I'm wrong.
But Christine, my girlfriend, was saying that there's, Korea has they call it something, and like so a lot of the Asian countries have a version of
Makes sense.
But we do the red envelope thing, which is Chinese, where
Yeah.
you give people money in
Yeah.
the envelopes, right? So anyway, it's the year of the snake, but specifically it's the year of the wooden snake, and I'm not super clear on why the wooden snake, but I will say that the snake, I chat GPT'd the meaning of it yesterday and how you could turn the meaning into something constructive. And it, brought up something pretty obvious that I want to kind of cling on to for the rest of the year, which is also something that has been a mantra of mine since I started feeling better. Shedding your old ways, shedding habits that don't serve you anymore, and mindsets and parts of yourself that you really just don't need anymore, stories that you don't need anymore, and creating something new and moving towards something new and brighter. And I think in doing that is to bring it back to why I even brought that up of living the message, is I've thought about how I can talk about this stuff and be helpful, especially for other men, around mental health and sanctity with what's going on with our minds and our spirits, and giving a little bit more permission. I think there's a lot of men kind of already doing that in a podcast forum, and I really want to get hyper local community with just being the message of being the guy that lives that path and has more fun, and I hang out with my friends more, and I have a much better balance with my work. And sometimes I wonder if a really solid mindfulness practice could have avoided all of this. If consistent therapy could have avoided all of this. I would say probably yes. I mean, we'll never know because I had to go through it.
Yeah.
But I would say probably yes. Because even a solid mindfulness practice, I would have been sitting with, what am I feeling?
Yeah.
What actually is this? But no,
Yeah.
I wasn't doing that. I was listening to podcasts. I was typing. I was on conference calls. I was doing literally everything else. I would do an ice tank before I do a mindfulness practice.
Yeah. 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 I mean, this isn't unique to you, but you are really good at constantly be taking things in, whether that be information,
It's so true.
knowledge. Like you're always, not always, but oftentimes listening to a podcast
Just
or
on.
Yeah.
Just
on.
always on.
On.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like stimulated
Yeah.
with input.
Yeah.
And that's such a good point too, because I've been doing technology disconnects lately, where like, especially on Sundays, if I don't have work, I'm doing like as much of the day as I can where my phone is face down away from me. I even have a special clock I put in my room that's, just a low. And I'm still doing all the other things too. I was telling you about my grounding mats that I got. I'm a nerd. I want to push the edges on.
You love
on
the gadgets.
wellness. Well, just wellness too.
Yeah.
I want to feel is good. It's like, since I've been, addicts would call this the pink cloud, and people in recovery call it the pink cloud, and people that are recovering from cancer and some serious illness call it the same thing, pink cloud. Of you become so grateful for this new opportunity in front of you of life and living. And you feel like you have this relationship with yourself that maybe you've never had before. And it's this true baptism by fire of like, I'm so fucking grateful for today. I wake up every day with so much gratitude.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for the people around me. I'm so grateful for even the vices out there. Like I got drunk a few nights ago, and I was like, oh man, I drank too much, and had a hangover. I was like, but it's nothing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm not saying do that every night. Like now I'm an alcoholic. I'm saying it's okay to push the edges, but feel it and taste it and smell all of it. Like really experience all of it. And that's the pink cloud of like living is so good.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah. I think
to feel that is to really feel that, not just go through the motions. It's hard to put it into words. It's a new existence for me.
Yeah, I think the ultimate is, and this is something that I've really, really given my best effort at embracing fully, is just feeling everything as much as I possibly can, like feeling it, going into it, like the highs and the lows, and being so thankful that I have the capacity to feel. Even on the low days, even when I'm feeling sad or hurt, or, you know, I mean, I'm dating. So there have been like a few men that have hurt.
Yeah.
There's been like where I've actually felt sadness and felt low. And the difference though, from like now to a few years ago, is I welcome it because I know it's not going to last forever. I know that I'm meant to feel this emotion so that it can move through me. It can come in and out, and it's not getting stuck and stored in my body. And then the same thing goes with the highs. I can feel the highest of highs because I know what that low feels like. And there's so much beauty in that.
That's so good.
And being human means the full rainbow of all of it.
And it's important to feel it all, like you say. And I wanted to also give someone something tactical again that was helping me when I was coming out of the fog is, and this is something a psychologist talked about on a podcast when I was taking it in, is our nervous system, parasympathetic, all of it is wired to only process those really acute, intense moments of depression and anxiety in increments of 15 to about 25 minutes. And so that's an important thing to remember, that you even think about when Rebel cries and she's having a meltdown. I've gotten to a place, she had one last night, where I set my timer and it's almost on the dot, 15 to 20 minutes, it's done. Because the nervous system is like, I'm good. I just need to get that out.
Yeah.
But a lot of us will try to numb that. Yeah. You know, I've done that before a lot, especially like end of day, you know, it's 5 o'clock somewhere,
yeah.
You know, and work is kind of stacked in this way where you've had maybe a few intense calls and some exchanges, and not even talking about your personal life, just all the other things, right? And you really try doing that though, where if you feel something really intense coming up in your gut, that heat, or something in your chest, or you're feeling anxious about something, or you're feeling a wave of melancholy, set your timer and pay attention to it. Keep your phone face up, or your timer like where you can see it, and notice that from the moment that timer started to about 20, at the most 25 minutes in, you're good for a few hours.
Yeah.
And you just keep riding that wave and feeling it and really getting into what that thing even was. And it's going to get better.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like layers of paint. It's little by little over time. And you get your way, you climb your way out of it.
This was really, really good. Thank you for, I mean, you know me, I could get super emotional right now, but I'm just so glad that you're on the other side.
Yeah, me too.
Love you so much.
I love you a lot too. And I'm so grateful to be here today and to be feeling good. And I'm so excited for tomorrow.